You've seen the footage of the skull before. It was filmed in a quarry in Patagonia in 2014, and since then has been making the rounds on Reddit, Twitter, and everywhere else online. People have had a lot to say about this creature, but one thing we don't see talked about very often is its brain. This prehistoric predator is really interesting because it gives us an unprecedented look at the evolution of intelligence in terrestrial animals. So today, let's talk about what makes this animal so special. This creature is a member of the family of extinct carnivorous dinosaurs called Abelisauridae, and this particular specimen is a new species which has been named Huinculsaurus Elatocranius. Let's start with the name. Elatocranius comes from the Greek words for broad skull, and refers to just how big this thing's head was. The genus name, Huinculsaurus, honors the indigenous people of the region where the fossil was found. But also, according to lead author eerily, the name alludes to the local legend of a giant monster that supposedly lives in the Rio de las Minas and devours anyone who gets too close. This dinosaur lived during the Late Cretaceous period, around 70 million years ago, when most of South America was a part of the supercontinent Gondwana. During its lifetime, the Huinculsaurus would have looked something like a smaller version of the mighty Tyrannosaurus rex, although it wasn't closely related to T-Rex. Instead, it was more closely related to other abelisaurs such as Carcharodontosaurus, Majungasaurus, and finally, yes, even to the mighty T-Rex. They were a fairly diverse group that were mostly medium-sized bipeds that lived between the Triassic and Cretaceous periods. Most abelisauroids were found in the southern hemisphere, particularly in places like Africa, Europe, and South America. They didn't get much bigger than around 6 meters long, except for a few species that reached up to 9 or 10 meters. Abelisaurids weren't like other theropods in several key respects. One of these differences can be seen in their skulls, which were shorter and wider than other theropods. Their teeth were also unique. In young individuals, they had sharp, serrated teeth for catching and tearing up prey. But as they got older, their teeth started to fall out and be replaced by larger, thicker teeth better suited for crushing bone. Now, the skull of the Huinculsaurus is just so bizarre that it's led some people to speculate that this animal might not have been a real dinosaur at all, but maybe some kind of prehistoric whale. You've got this massive head, a narrow jaw and teeth that are more like those of a mammal than a reptile. You put all those things together, and you get something that definitely looks alien-like. But we know this thing was a dino because it was identified with a bunch of diagnostic features, like the shape of its scapula and pelvis, the presence of feathers, and, of course, its teeth. You see, while mammals do have teeth like this, the structure of those teeth is completely different from that of the Huinculsaurus. Mammalian teeth are made of dentin and enamel, just like reptilian teeth. But they're also made of a softer tissue called dental papilla. That's why mammalian teeth are softer and more easily replaced than reptile teeth. When you bite into a steak, your teeth will flex and bend a little bit. Dinosaur teeth, on the other hand, are hard and rigid and don't bend much at all. And since the Huinculsaurus teeth show clear signs of being anchored in sockets and surrounded by a bony dental plate, we can confidently say they were real dinosaur teeth. So what's going on here? Why does this dinosaur have teeth so similar to mammals if it isn't related to mammals? Well, it's not exactly clear. One idea is that the Abelisauroids developed these teeth independently after diverging from other theropods. After all, they do share many primitive reptilian characteristics, such as a low metabolic rate, a sprawling posture, and the ability to lay eggs. At the same time, though, they have features that are more typical of birds. These include a wishbone, feathers, a furcula, and a lack of a tail. So it seems like they evolved from a more bird-like ancestor than we originally thought. More evidence for this comes from the presence of a structure in the inner ear called the extracollinear macula. This structure is only found in theropod dinosaurs that were closely related to birds. Now, this all brings me to the reason I wanted to make a video on the Huinculsaurus, because it seems like this animal was smarter than any other non-avian dinosaur that came before it, and that's due to its brain. While studying the endocast of this dinosaur's brain, researchers noticed that it was way bigger than expected. In fact, it's the largest brain ever discovered in a terrestrial non-avian dinosaur. The volume of this brain was around 340 cubic centimeters, which is almost twice the size of the next largest theropod brain. To put that in perspective, that's about the same size as the human brain. As far as we can tell, only one other dinosaur had a similarly large brain, the aquatic Mosasaurus. Now, this isn't the first time we've seen something like this. Last year, we talked about another smallish theropod that had an unexpectedly large brain. That was the Microraptor, a four-winged dinosaur from China. But unlike the Microraptor, the Huinculsaurus didn't have feathers or wings or live in trees. It was a big cat-sized dinosaur with tiny arms and huge teeth. It's not clear how a brain this big could fit inside such a small body. Its brain was around 10% of its total body weight. For comparison, a blue whale's brain is less than 2% of its body weight. So clearly, there's something else going on here. Unfortunately, right now, researchers aren't sure what's going on. They ran some tests on the Huinculsaurus brain, but it turned out that it wasn't hollow. So that rules out one potential explanation. Some dinosaurs had spongy bones inside their heads that reduced the overall weight of their skull. And since brains are mostly made of water, this would have saved the animal some energy. But that wasn't happening here. Also, the brain didn't seem to have any more folds than other theropod brains. More folds equal more surface area, which equals more brain power. So again, this doesn't explain why the Huinculsaurus brain was so big. What we do know is that dinosaurs with bigger brains tended to be smarter, more social animals. Take a look at this chart. It shows the relationship between brain size and social complexity in modern birds. Birds with larger brains are generally considered to be more intelligent and more social. Now, we can't assume that the Huinculsaurus was social just because it had a large brain, but it's definitely possible. In 2021, researchers reported the discovery of a second Huinculsaurus specimen. This individual was a juvenile and was around 4 meters long. It was also missing a bunch of teeth, which would have made eating a problem for a smaller, weaker animal. If the Elatocranius was social, perhaps it hunted in packs or helped care for its young. These behaviors would have required a certain level of intelligence that may have been facilitated by its large brain. Ultimately, though, we don't know why the Huinculsaurus had such a big brain. It could be related to its diet or its sensory abilities or social behavior, or maybe it's totally unrelated. All we know for sure is that it's one of the smartest non-avian dinosaurs we've ever found. And given that the Abelisaurids were medium-sized predators, that means that a medium-sized brain can be just as useful as a giant one. That's all for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.